Mhm.
So you had is it a TBI, traumatic brain injury, and
Yes.
you basically woke up one day not knowing anything, right? Like no memory at all. So tell us, I don't want to know what happened yet. We'll get to that point, but
Mhm.
tell me about that period where you wake up and you what, know nothing? Like you have no memory.
Just a very surreal experience to have these realizations of things going on around and not having a clue. Absolutely no clue who I was, where I'd come from, what was going on around me, no connection to people or things. It's a very bizarre experience.
So, do you even think, do I have sisters? Do I have brothers? Like, did that ever, like, who is my family? Like, did that ever,
I don't remember ever thinking things like that. It was more of um, what's going on and why don't I understand this?
mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's something going on. It's not that I felt like I was being taken up by a UFO or anything, not that kind of crazy or
Right.
weird, whatever you want to call it. But, you know, there was none of that disconnection from being human or being on Earth. It was just, I don't quite understand what's going on. And it didn't really feel like a dream. It wasn't like, oh, I must be dreaming and I'm just going to wake up. It was just, there was enough awareness to know that I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain,
Yeah.
but to me, it was more emotional connections and relationships that I completely lost.
Yeah. Did you have a job before this event, I guess? Did you work?
I did. What I learned was I actually was working in economic development as an assistant to a director and was working full time. So when this happened, I actually didn't lose my job. We didn't know what the recovery period would be. And I will say I learned very quickly, and in hindsight, I'm obviously a very stubborn person. I don't really give into situational things very easily. So I tried going back to work, but I was being told frequently that I probably wouldn't go back to anything more than part time because of the injury, and certainly not full time for quite a long time. But I tried.
Yeah. Did you have the knowledge of what was required for the job? Did you even still have that knowledge, or were you
No,
struggling? Yeah, you were struggling.
I was struggling, and because thankfully I think because I'm kind of the person who will do a dear diary kind of thing and journaled, and that's a good way for me to have gone back over the last 5 years to understand what the journey has been, because I truly don't even remember a lot of the recovery process as a memory. I go back and read it and go, wow, okay, and I can read about what my feelings were, and I can read about different experiences or frustrations, but I don't actually have memories of those. But I do have notes about trying to go back to work and sitting at my desk and literally sitting there for 2 hours, just sitting there. I
Right.
had no clue what to do. And so what I'd written in my journal was I felt like an ornament because I couldn't function.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, I think, because of the brain injury, a lot of it became a fearful situation for me because I felt like I had absolutely no control
Mhm.
and I couldn't tap back into something. I couldn't find that magic button that would help me go, oh, that's okay. I'm just going to be Nicci, and Nicci's just going to come back magically tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that never happened.
Yeah. I know when we talked last week, I was kind of hearing, your story. You had mentioned that you knew how to play the piano before everything happened, and then afterwards you couldn't. Was it the piano? You couldn't remember how to play the piano anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I had a piano in my home, and it literally was just a piece of furniture, but I had some level of desire. Music has been a real good connection for me probably most of my life because I know now that I played from the age 5. But when I would look at the piano right after this brain injury, I would feel sadness
Yeah.
because I'd look at it and I'd look at the sheet music and go, I don't know how these two things connect. And I could not figure it out. And that made me incredibly sad.
Yeah.
But I never wanted to get rid of the piano, and nobody else played. So it really became a piece of furniture for a long time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until last year that I actually sat back at the piano without feeling that fear, and also feeling a little bit angry, to be honest, that I couldn't figure out what the black and white is and what the notes are. It was a very emotional thing for me to sit at a piano again.
Yeah. Wow. You had also mentioned before that you would be in the car with somebody and you knew you were going somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
but you had that sense of where are we?
Right.
Tell me about that experience that you felt.
So I've lived in Colorado over 35 years and driven this state a lot. And again, I have journaled apparently most of my life, and it's great to go back and read these things. And a very good friend of mine took me to some of my medical appointments from the Western Slope over to Denver, and I was not in a position or condition to drive. So she would do the driving, and for the most part, just driving along, having a conversation with a girlfriend, is great. And once in a while, I would look out of the window on a highway that I have driven thousands of times and be in absolute panic because I would not recognize anything and I wouldn't know what direction I was going. It didn't even resonate as being in Colorado anymore. I just felt like I was in a complete different land. I just had no clue where I was. That again, it is a fear thing, but major anxiety.
So tell me what caused this brain injury. Basically, it's a freak accident, right?
I have absolutely no memory of what happened. I did, because of where it happened, actually see the video. And again, no emotional connection whatsoever. I watch what happens, which as it unfolds, two vehicles on the highway swerved to avoid each other. And I was standing outside of my vehicle at a gas station pumping gas. And in their swerving to avoid each other, one hit the curb right outside the gas station, went airborne, and landed basically the front end of my car and pushed my car into me. And I just flew backwards over the hose of the gas station and landed on my head on the concrete. So I refer to it jokingly now as my Matrix moment, because I literally flew backwards but landed on my head. So I probably, measurement wise, I would say it's about 12 to 15 feet away from the car when I landed.
Yeah. And weren't you you told me at one point you were like laying in gasoline pretty much for how many minutes until somebody actually came, ambulance.
Right.
Yeah.
So being in a small rural town, that particular time, our emergency services are pretty much volunteer. And unfortunately, I learned, were out at a fatal rollover accident about 45 minutes away. And so it took 45 minutes for EMS to show up. So the gasoline kept pumping in the car and then was spilling over from my car. And so I had gasoline pumping onto me for the duration of however long that was to pump a whole tank of gas. So it was actively pumping gas for a couple of minutes. And then because it had come downhill slightly, I was just laying in the gasoline and it was soaking up into my clothes. So I was just soaked in gasoline. And 45 minutes from impact to on the video, when medical is there, I'm still just laying in gasoline.
So were there no witnesses? Did nobody come and drag you out of the castle?
No.
Where were employees? Where was everybody?
That actually is more alarming to me than the fact that I actually got hit, which it may be a bizarre way to look at it. But no, people continued pumping gas. One gentleman in the video walks past me and kind of knocked me with his cane. kind of to check if I was still
Oh my God.
alive. It's like he kind of poked and prodded me a couple of times in the abdomen, like, "You still there, lady?" And I was completely unconscious. And then he went about his business. And then a couple of people who had seen it happen were able to come from their vehicles and wrap me in blankets, shut the pump off. But even that, I think, was probably 4 or 5 minutes into it, but nobody removed me from the area.
Yeah.
Probably because they didn't know what the injuries were and,
Right.
didn't know how long EMS was going to take to get there.
Yeah. And I think too, when there's gasoline involved, I think people are just like, they just know it's dangerous,
Yep. They're a little leery of
Yeah.
jumping into, oh,
Yeah.
look, she's laying in a pool of gasoline. Let's go in. Yeah.
And you only know this because you saw the video surveillance.
Right.
Was it the police ended up showing you 6 months after it happened, I think?
Yeah, and throughout, so, there was a lawsuit because of the injury to try and help me with medical expenses and what have you. But a few times that video was shown, and it became stressful to watch it, not because it upset me to see what happened to me. It became more stressful because I couldn't remember it and I could not associate with the person in the video.
Yeah.
Because I literally looked at it the first time and said, "Man, it looks like that hurt. Poor lady." It didn't even connect that it was me.
Yeah. When we were talking, was it last week or so, that since this brain injury, you've kind of discovered a creative side of your brain, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But having worked through some of the fear, like with the piano and what have you, what I've noticed through what I guess you would refer to as a recovery process, my brain or myself, I don't really retain information. So I don't feel like I am encumbered by bad memories or the daily events. So I feel like my clarity is actually a lot better. And so I feel like I think very, very clearly. There's some functions I don't have, like math can be a problem for me if I'm trying to figure something out in my head and remembering what happened yesterday or what I ate yesterday. To me, I'm not remembering unimportant information. So I'm not getting bogged down with stuff that I think most people probably do. So now the things that have come to the surface are all very creative. The irony of some of this is I don't have the attention span and the focus to read a book, but now I'm writing one. I don't remember how to crochet anymore. I do play piano a little bit now, but I'm writing a book which the storyline came in some very, very clear recurring dreams. And I started thinking, well, this is kind of interesting. And it made me curious. So I started researching some of the things I was dreaming and realized there was some reality and some truth to some of these things. So it became a big storyline. So now I'm writing a book. I'm going, who knew?
So it's actually, you shouldn't minimize it. It's a novel. Like, it's not a book, it's a novel.
It is a novel, and it's pretty intricate. If you look at, I don't want to give the whole storyline away, obviously, but it goes back to Norman times and the development of civil law in Europe. The novel and the story itself actually takes place in Baton Rouge, which I will say I've become obsessed with because I've been researching the place, and I have to now go there. I've never been there. I now have to go. But it's a very intricate story about kind of how law students might be researching law that's existing and saying, well, what if this happened? How would the law have been different? And the particular focus of the storyline is one case that happened in England, close to where I grew up, and it has never been solved. And so I'm exploring the possibility of how the story plays out into, is there another option? Is there actually a way of solving this murder case that I've based the story on? So it's very fun. It's very intricate. There's multiple layers. And when I get to writing, I write every day. It could be a paragraph. It could be a whole chapter.
Wow.
But it's fun. It's fun. I feel very create. I mean, that creative juice when it gets going is amazing. So whether it's writing a book, I wrote the music for my own wedding, which blows me away considering I was so fearful of touching a piano again. But I sat down and wrote a piece to walk down the aisle. I found binders from my last house move that had binders and books and notebooks that had poems and songs and all kinds of things. And so that's been a fun way to reconnect with maybe who I was, but now who I am now, it has is, if you could think of it like losing your baggage in an airport. I've lost all that baggage, and now I'm just having the fun side of life.
Yeah.
And I don't worry about who I used to be. Now I have the privilege of being who I should be.
You told me there's a story though with the wedding music, right? With the notes. You got to tell me again.
Yeah, there is. So Eric, my husband, and I actually met through a mutual friend who's now a mutual friend of ours, which is way to go, Joe McNeil.
Right? I love Joe McNeil.
I know. Who knew he had so much power? Anyway,
No.
so yeah, we met actually on Facebook through this mutual friend, and because I had put up a meme saying I wanted somebody to dance in the rain, and Eric was the only person or my only friend on Facebook who had actually responded to that. And it was a little flirtatious, and I didn't care because he was in Indiana and I was in Colorado, and I'm like, what does that hurt? You know, it ended up 2 or 3 weeks later, we started talking. So the piece of music that I wrote actually is called Rain. And because Eric and I had talked about his relationship with his dad, some of the very few memories I have from my childhood very much center around my maternal grandfather, who was a huge positive influence on me. And so, again, in a dream, I just kind of felt this weird, I don't know, inspiration, for lack of a better word, of a conversation between his dad, who has passed, my grandfather, who has passed, going, you know, we ought to really bring these two together. They'd be great together. And so the way it's written is a conversation between the two of them, introducing Eric and I, and then the four of us having a conversation. And then the end part of the tune is just Eric and I saying, yeah, we really should be together. But it's called Rain. It's very, if you listen to it, it sounds very much like raindrops growing into kind of like a summer, not a storm, but a summer rainfall. Yeah. Who
That's
knew?
very creative right there. I mean, I just see music notes and I'm like, that's nice. And you actually took it to the next level. And
right. So the actual notes are based on our names.
uh-huh.
So it's all four of our names. That's all it is. It's just our names. And then the
Yep.
conversation with the combination of those notes becomes a conversation.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's way more than I could ever do.
But if you'd asked me 5 years ago after the injury, do you think you'll write some music? I go, I can't even touch a piano. No. So that's why I think I look at it now as a privilege. There's been many very dark days in the beginning of fear and anxiety and how do I provide for my family. And then there's been hilarious moments where early on when I probably should not have been driving, not because I forgot how to drive, but I would not remember where I was. And that would cause anxiety when I realized that I was lost. But there was one time I was just so eager to go and get some groceries for myself that I left to go to the grocery store in town and ended up 25 miles away in the next town at the right grocery store, I will say. I was at Kroger. I managed to stick at Kroger, but I was in the wrong town. And it didn't faze me. It didn't make me go, oh, I'm in the wrong place. But my partner called and said, well, you should be back by now. Where are you? And I said, well, I just got here. What do you mean you just got here? You should have been and gone and come back by now. I'm like, no. And I described where I was. And he said, well, you're in the wrong town. But okay, come on back.
That's what I was going to ask you, if you find, humor in things, because I know as much as you experienced fear and anxiety, I feel like you have been able to embrace it and find the humor in things. You use Post-it notes to remember things at one point.
I would have Post-it notes absolutely everywhere, or notebooks everywhere. And really, the funny side of that would be I could write a Post-it note, put it in a place that I should remember. Like as I'm leaving the house, there's a Post-it note that might have said, "Remember your keys." And I would not even, I mean, I could read it and it didn't connect. It didn't kind of resonate at all. And I'd leave the house. And then I'd go, oh, I don't know my keys.
You're like
I mean,
me.
there's silly stuff. But yeah, and 15 different Post-it notes for the same appointment. And I'd still forget the appointment because if it wasn't really present right in front of me at the time, I still wouldn't remember. And those were the biggest memory issues for me. They were very frustrating. But again, I think humor has probably, along with music, been a center of my life. I do have a journal entry about trying to play Uno with my youngest son about 6 or 7 months after the car wreck. And I was in my head playing Uno. The rules I was playing by, though, were gin rummy. And he was so sweet. And he'd be good, that's not how we play this.
Oh.
No, that's not how we do that. And then, but I'd be, well, but it is. And I was so adamant. Yes, this is how we do it. He switched to playing gin rummy with me with Uno cards. Yeah. So we found humor in a lot of things. And I still have a pretty wicked sense of humor. I live very much in the moment and the present, because to me, this is a gift. One of my journal entries, and I don't think I told you about this before, and I did some reading after we talked, was out of the fear and the depression and the darkness, what was my kind of turning point that turned everything to a positive again? And I found an entry that was about a year after the accident that I had written down. I was probably feeling a little down, little, internally self-pity kind of moment. But what I wrote down was the question of, well, why me, God? But not why me in a self-pity mode, but why? Why me? What is it you're wanting to do with this, God? What is it that you think I'm capable of doing with this injury or post-injury that has an impact and represents how good you are? And part of the question was, what if it had been an old man? He wouldn't have survived. What if it had been a pregnant woman? And so that, I think, really sparked inside of me, there really was a purpose behind this. And whatever God's plan for it is, sure, as a human, I'm going to question it, but I got to embrace it and say, all right, let's see where this journey goes. Obviously, I've had life up to this point, and I don't remember any of it for the most part, but where are we going now? And how do I get past internalizing it and just keep it as a faith moment and say, all right, I'm willing to grow and I'm willing to learn, and I want to keep living. I want to be able to represent what my faith means to me, not because, oh, God is good and I got whacked upside the head, but God is good. He has a reason for this, and whoever it helps by talking about it, whoever it encourages. I'm a strong believer that I really dislike self-help books that are written in such a kind of technical lab kind of manner where, oh, we've studied 50 people and this is the absolute answer. No, it's not. I'd rather read somebody's personal story and listen to the vulnerability and listen to that transparency and say, I can relate to that. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want for people if they listen to this, is to say, wow, okay, well, it's a wild and crazy story, but there is that ability to move on and grow and succeed. I went from almost complete bankruptcy because of the wreck, not being able to work, to in 5 years, I've been able to get out of debt, buy a home, and I'm now married happily.
Yeah.
And I'm writing a novel and I'm writing music and I'm enjoying life and embracing this new opportunity to live. But it's also humbling to think that God said, well, I'm about to create a mess on the highway and a gas station because I have a purpose. And there was one, this actually came up very recently, I think. I don't remember if it was on YouTube, but a friend of mine posted the video and it was on social media, and it was a young lady talking about our relationship with God and creation. Can I read it to you? Because I actually wrote it down.
Yes,
I love this. And what she said was, why is it when God created fish, he spoke to the seas? When he created trees, he talked to the earth. And when he created us, he spoke to himself. What happens when you take a fish out of the water? It dies. When you take a tree out of the soil, it dies. What happens when we become disconnected from God? We die. God is our natural environment. We were created to live in the presence of God. It is only in him that we exist.
Wow.
That literally takes my breath away.
Yeah.
Because it said to me, that's it. He created me to exist in him. And so why wouldn't I embrace? This is a very bizarre journey if you put it in human terms, but in God's terms, this is exactly what he planned.
Yeah.
I just have to have that courage to say, okay, I'm up for it. I'll go on the journey. Show me where it's going to go. And my faith has taken me to the point where I go to scripture for encouragement, and I go to scripture to help me understand and embrace these changes and this new clean slate. And so one of mine that I have written several times in my journals is Ephesians 2:10. And that tells me, everything was prepared in advance. He has a purpose. He's got a reason for us to exist.
Well, Nicci, I love your story. I love your perspective. I love, I feel like you and I could probably talk for hours about, the fact that you have the faith that you have after, probably years of fear and anxiety, and I don't think you ever let go of your faith, right? Like it was always a part of who you were.
I think it must have been very ingrained in me before too. Knowing that I was on a worship team too really helped me understand that. And I will be very honest. My faith was there. I got to the point where I was comfortable enough being mad at God that I shook my fist a few times and I said, I don't know what you think you're doing, but I don't appreciate this journey right now. And when I got to the point where I could be honest about how I felt, that's when I started healing.
I think you being able to embrace change, find humor in this situation, I think you're just an incredible person with an amazing story. And I'm just so grateful that you are here to share it with us. So
well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nicci. I wish you the best with what you're doing in life, and it sounds like you're really enjoying it. So thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you too, Heather. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.